once again welcome you to our study of the Bible, the Word in a Year. So this evening we're moving on to another book that aligns with the prophetic books of the Old Testament that we've been going through over the last couple sessions. But it also has narrative aspects as well. So in addition to having prophecies, this book also tells a story. And the story that it tells is of the exiles from Jerusalem who arrive in Babylon after the first attack that Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians make on the city that you can read about in the book of 2 Kings in chapter 24. So the Babylonians, they plundered the city and the temple, and they take the first wave of Israelites into exile. And some of the first wave of prisoners that were taken, they actually belonged to the royal line of Judah. So there are four notable individuals that we will discover, and they are Daniel, who's later named Belshazzar, and then there's three of his friends, and they're best known by their Babylonian names, and that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The big picture and the main idea of the book of Daniel are in relation to the sovereignty of God. You see, God is in control of all things. And even when the rulers of the earth, when they've believed that they're in control, when they have everything in their grasp, really it's God that has control over all things and is over them as well. And the experiences that we see throughout this book, they provide both hope and also an assurance that God will confront evil and will deliver his people. We can break down this book into really three different sections. The first part is in chapters 1 through 6. Which is dreams, visions, and persecutions. The second part is in chapter 7, which is Daniel's dream of the four beasts and the Son of Man. The final part is in chapters 8 through 12, which is visions of the future kingdoms and an angelic vision. And at first, this book's design, it seems really simple. And we could probably really just break this up into two parts, chapters 1 through 6 and then chapters 7 through 12. But 7 plays an important part, so we'll break it up into 3. But the two-part design is actually more interesting by another feature, and that's the fact that this book was originally written in two different languages. Chapter 1, it was originally written in Hebrew. Chapters 2 through 7 was actually written in Aramaic. It was a cousin language to Hebrew that was spoken throughout much of the ancient empires of the earth at the time this was written. Chapters 8 and 12, though, they go back to the Hebrew language, and this design shows that chapters 2 and 7 are a coherent section, that they're meant to be read as a single unit. As you read through the book of Daniel, you have to understand that it's both prophetic and also at the same time narrative at different times. There are prophetic elements that are even woven into the narrative elements of this book. So starting with the first section, in chapters 1 through 6, we're introduced to Daniel and his three friends. In chapter 1, it introduces the basic plot that drives this entire story, and it's Daniel and his three friends. They were exiled from Jerusalem, and they were selected to serve in the courts of the king, King Nebuchadnezzar. So as servants in the court of the king, they were pressured into giving up their observances of a kosher diet according to the Torah. But their refusal, it puts them in a dangerous position. But they stay loyal to Yahweh, and as a result, God delivers them. And also they're then elevated by the king Nebuchadnezzar. In chapter 2, we discover that the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, that he has dreams, and he's had a particular dream that he wants to be interpreted. He consults the court magicians and the sorcerers, but they're unable to help interpret this dream. They can't figure out what the meaning is. Because of Daniel's elevated status, he's called on to interpret this dream. And God provides Daniel with the ability to interpret this dream. And Daniel interprets this dream to be a sequence of kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of a statue with different makes at different layers. And these different kingdoms, they would follow after Babylon, and they would fill the world with violence. And the final kingdom is God's kingdom. that will one day come and humble the arrogant nations of the world, filling the earth with healing and also justice. As a result of Daniel's interpretation, he's promoted to a higher honor in Nebuchadnezzar's court. Chapter 3, it tells the famous story of the deliverance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar, he constructs this tall golden idol out in the plain of Shinar, and he instructs everyone to bow down to it when the music plays. If they refuse, they face certain death. So when the three Hebrews refuse to do so, they're cast into a fiery furnace. And when Nebuchadnezzar, he looks into the furnace, he expects them to be burnt. But he sees 4 individuals, not 3 figures. And one, he says, has the resemblance of the Son of God. And this is a Christophany, an appearance of Jesus before his incarnation in the Old Testament. The 3 Hebrews, they're delivered again from the wickedness of the king. Chapters 4 and 5, they tell the stories of Nebuchadnezzar and also of his son Belshazzar. Both are filled with pride because of their great power. And in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, he has a dream that, again, only Daniel can interpret. Yet he arrogantly resists against being humble. And as a result, he's stricken with a madness. And he becomes like a beast of the field. Eventually, he does humble himself. And when he does, his humanity is restored. Chapter 5, we read about Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar. And he does not humble himself at all. He throws an elaborate party, and he uses the vessels from the temple of God that were taken during his father's raid on the city to throw this elaborate celebration. We read about the taking of these vessels in chapter 1. But as a result, God writes his judgment on the wall that only Daniel can interpret. And that very night, Belshazzar is assassinated, and the kingdom is wrested away from Babylon. And eventually the Medes and the Persians, they take control. In chapter 6, Daniel is the one who faces persecution. The ruler, Darius, he's tricked into signing an order that anyone who's caught praying to any other deity other than the king will be cast into a den of lions. And Daniel, he faithfully prays each day. And he's found praying, and as a result, he finds himself in a den of lions. Darius, he regrets this order that he signed, but because of the law system of the Persians, there's nothing else that he can do other than hope that God delivers him. And God does deliver Daniel from the lions. And as a result, the king then exalts Daniel and praises Yahweh. The second part of this book is Daniel's dream of the 4 beasts and the Son of Man. In chapter 7, Daniel has a dream of 4 beasts who rise up out of the sea. And although Daniel has been given the interpretation for his other dreams that he had to be called on to interpret, this one leaves him perplexed. And so an angel comes to give him the interpretation. So Daniel sees these 4 beasts rising up out of the sea in succession. There's a lion, a bear, and a winged leopard. The final kingdom is that of a beast with a number of different horns. Horns in the Old Testament, you have to understand, they represent kings most often. And one horn in particular exalts itself above God, and it's arrogant. This horn persecutes God's covenant people. And the symbol that's used for both God's covenant people and for their king from the line of David is called the Son of Man. And God is referred to as the Ancient of Days in this section. He destroys the great monster, and he exalts the Son of Man to the clouds, where he sits at God's side and shares in God's rule over the nations. So this chapter, it's a bit of a linchpin of sorts that kind of ties much of this book together. There were 3 stories of persecution that happened in chapters 1, 3, and 6. And they're meant to offer hope to God's suffering people among the nations. They suffer because human kingdoms, they've become beasts, as seen in chapters 4 and 5. The visions given in chapters 2 and also in chapter 7, they encourage patience that waits for God to bring his rule over the nations and over the world to vindicate his people. So when God will do this is set up in the final three visions in the last section of this book. The final section of this book, it speaks of the visions of the future kingdoms, and also a final angelic vision. In chapter 8, Daniel has another vision. And it's about the final two beasts from chapter 7. This time, though, they're symbolized by a ram, which is a symbol for the ancient Medes and Persians, and also a goat, who's an image of ancient Greece. So out of the goat rises many horns, one of which symbolizes the evil king from the previous chapter that we just talked about. In this vision, we receive a little bit more information about the king who exalts himself above God. This king will attack Jerusalem and also exalt himself above God by defiling the temple with a number of idols. In the end, this king will be destroyed by God, who in turn exalt his people and his kingdom. Chapter 9, Daniel's puzzled as to when this will all take place. And as a result, he consults Jeremiah's scroll. We talked about Jeremiah a few weeks ago, where Jeremiah says that Israel will be in exile for 70 years. And he sees that the end of these 70 years is near, and he prays a prayer of repentance and asks God to fulfill his promise. Well, an angel appears to Daniel and informs him that Israel's sin and Israel's rebellion, they haven't been properly dealt with yet. And as a result, their impression would last 7 times as long under the nations of the earth. And this deeply disturbs Daniel, and he has one final vision that lasts from chapters 10 to 12. And in it, there are a number of different kingdoms that they each rise up. And it's the same sequence of kingdoms: Persia, and then Greece, and the personage of Alexander the Great, followed by a number of lesser kings. And this leads up to this final king, the king of the north, he's referred to, who invades Jerusalem and sets up idols in the temple. And the vision concludes with the king suddenly coming to ruin. Now, many have interpreted these kings in various different lights. Some believe that the final king was the Syrian king Antiochus, who desecrated the temple in the mid-2nd century BC. Some think that it was the Roman Empire that followed and destroyed the temple in around 70 AD. Others believe that they will be fulfilled when Jesus returns. And perhaps all of these are correct in one way or another. The book of Daniel, it's meant to offer hope to all generations. It provides an insight into the workings of God. And regardless of what we see happening around us, we know that God is faithful and that he will fulfill all things according to his purpose in his time. Additionally, we know that he rules all things and is over all things. There's not one thing that catches him off guard or catches him by surprise. We know that he is a protector of his people, and that one day he will bring everything into proper order and restore all things to perfect shalom. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next session.